Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the special closed session meeting Monday, September 9th, 2024. Calling the meeting to order at 5:30. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona, absent. Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark, if you'd lead us in the
Yes,
pledge.
please. Stand. Place your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we don't appear to have any public communications requests. So it is time to announce that we're going to recess. Do you want to say something, Madam Attorney, or are we just going to go?
Yes, I will announce the item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city will hold this closed session on anticipated litigation regarding significant exposure to litigation for one potential case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2 and on anticipated litigation regarding the initiation of litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4 regarding Southern California Edison Company versus California State Board of Equalization, Superior Court, California, County of Orange, case number 30-2024 014032115-CU-MC-CXC. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, we are now adjourned to closed session. Okay, coming back from closed session, then, Madam Attorney, if you would read out what we have decided.
Yes, so on, regarding closed session agenda item 2A, there is no reportable action, staff direction was given. And on item 2B, again, staff direction given, but no reportable action. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. In that case, closed session is closed. We will start the open session in approximately 15 minutes. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting, Monday, September 9th, 2024. Call the meeting to order at 6:30. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here. Dr. Matthews, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we do not have any proclamations, but we do have a couple of presentations. Do you want to introduce those to us, Mr. City Manager?
Yes, the first one, we have Doug McAllister from Frontier Communications. He is here to talk about some of the changes we may see in our streets here in town and other issues related to Frontier and what they're doing for us. So take it away, Doug.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, City Council, my name is Doug McAllister. I'm the Vice President of External Affairs for Frontier Communications. My scope of work, basically my reason for existing, is I am tasked with being the senior executive point of contact for the senior executives of cities and counties in California. My role is to work throughout all of California, and so I've been lots of these meetings. I also spent well over a decade, almost a decade and a half on your side of the dais. I was mayor of Murrieta, and I have been through thousands of presentations, so I get it. So what we're going to do right now is get through this presentation on the deck side as fast as we can, and then we're going to move on to the questions, because I don't want to answer questions you're not asking and such, but I do want to make sure you get the answers to the questions you do have. So if we could start that, there it is. I have the right city this time. One time I didn't. Basically, the fiber optics, you all probably know what that is, but for this, just to make sure, it's not copper. Fiber optic is basically it's glass, it's light, very fast. We're going to talk about how fast that is here in a bit, but it's basically future-proof. What a lot of the things that copper challenges us with, it rains, it gets wet, it stops working. The copper was a 140-year technology, and it's time to move on to the 21st century, and also allows for speed. And we're going to talk about what that means for you and your constituents here. Let's move on to the next slide. This is not an official quote for Frontier. This is me saying this. Frontier came to me a little over 2 years ago. They were moving forward with their fiber optic build nationwide. And I had worked with Frontier back when it was Verizon some time ago, a decade ago. And so they came back to me and asked me to come back to help them move forward on this build for them. And I was very clear with them. I was, let's get the band back together. Yay, we can do that. But I wanted them to understand that when I came back, if they wanted me to move this forward for California, they had to understand I work for you. It's important that when you say jump, Frontier says how high. And then we find ways to, what I call find ways to yes. And so I was pretty adamant about that. Didn't expect them to take the deal. And they did. They embraced it. And the last couple of years, it's been great, allowing me basically to work for you and your counterparts around the state, so that we can move these things forward in a way that, rather than Frontier coming and say, here, I've got this square peg, I'm going to put it in this round hole, whether you like it or not, as too many utilities are going to do. My role is to see to it that we find out exactly how we can work together and make it more collaborative. So we've been through the whole process with that with your team. Your team has been great. This presentation right now is kind of in the middle of the build, and I just wanted to get here and give you an opportunity where we are with it and where we're going to be going. But this is my quote. It says, if we're going to do something bigger than we ever have, then we're better do business better than we ever have. And that's what we're aiming to do at this point. Frontier is a huge company. It's like taking an ocean liner and turning it with a paddle. But to their credit, they're trying. And so we're moving forward in that direction. This slide here just basically talks about the process, what we do before we get started, the permits and construction that we work with your team to make happen, and then after construction. I am mostly concerned, I work with the permits construction, and we do a lot of work to see to it that's collaboratively done. And if we screw up or a contractor screws up, my job is to fix it. I am also very focused on after construction to make sure that what we said we would do gets done. And it gets finished. The sidewalks put back, the streets put back, all those things happen. And then actually, the way we said that we do it according to the permit. And so I will say that at this juncture, once again, my role is to interact with you. If anything comes to your attention, I don't care how small it might seem. If it when I was in office, I'd get hit up in church, I'd get hit up at the store, I'd get hit up everywhere. I know what that's like. What I hated was having to say, I don't know what you're talking about. And then, even worse, then I didn't know who to talk to find out what they were talking about. And so I don't care. If it rises to your level or to your city manager's level of attention, that makes it important to me. And so therefore, just either through your city manager or directly to me, give me a call, give me a text, give me an email, and I'll turn it around many times the same day. It just depends on what the issue is. Sometimes it's an outage, and you want to know why. Ping me. That's what I'm here for. So that kind of applies to the after-construction component of this, is that as things are moving, if things look like that sidewalk's been kind of destroyed for a long time, don't take the second breath. Reach out to me. I'll find out what's going on. Okay, Rick. There we go. Fiber, basically, there's the top three things I want to talk about. It's 100% fiber connection. I'm going to talk about what that means here in a bit. But this is not a hybrid system. This is not, we start off with fiber to a certain point, and then to the whole neighborhood it becomes copper. This is not glorified DSL. This is fiber optic, and it makes a huge difference that way. You get a stronger connection between the devices, meaning I read a study a couple of years ago, I guess it was now, where they said the average home has 22 devices. I didn't believe them. And so I went to my house and started counting. Now it's me, it's my wife, and my cat. And my cat doesn't do much on the internet. But we have 13 devices at our house. And I have the second lowest speed that Verizon, Freudian slip, that Frontier offers. And we don't have any buffering. We don't have any of that going on. It's super fast. When Verizon came to me in 2003, 2004, and asked me that, they wanted to make Murrieta one of the first cities in the nation to have FiOS. Remember that, the FiOS thing? All I heard was blah, 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 free, because it was going to make a big difference for us. And we went from a bedroom community to a biotech community, simply because we had a broadband backbone. That was 50 megs was the top speed. We're going to talk about speeds that blow that out of the water here in a minute. But basically what it is, you're not going to have the DSL issue. You're not going to be at the end of a line and watching the Super Bowl and it buffers and you can't see it. As many people as you want could be on your devices. They're in your home, and it's not going to make a difference. It still keeps the speeds. This line here, access up to 5 gigs upload and download speeds. That is ancient history. We're up to 7 gigs now. And so it's I don't know what you do with 1 gig. But some folks want 7 gigs, and so we're offering that product now as we span. And you can look at the rest of that at your leisure. Let's move on to the next slide. When I was talking about 100% fiber network, that starts off with, on the left-hand side is like our central office, and then all the way to the right-hand side to your router, to the side of your house, you have fiber. The number 2 slide is like a hub, and outside of the community, we try to keep those outside the community because they're bigger. And then the next slide, the next one is number 3. There is the terminal that's usually out in front of the houses or up on the telephone poles. And then from there, it comes to the side of your house, and then the wiring in your house takes it to your router. And that is what allows us for these incredible speeds. What's nice is it doesn't take power; it's just light. So all the way from our home office, to our central office, to your house, it's light and it's fast. And the beauty of it is it's one and done. Once this network is in your city, which we're in the process of doing now, and we want to go to 10 gigs, which I'm guessing we will at some point, and then we just changed some lights and things in the central office, and now we're at 10 gigs. That's how we've gone from 1 to 2 to 5 now to 7 gigs. We just changed some equipment in the central office. So we're not going to have to do this again. But this is where we are now. Now, you may have heard of a certain acquisition that's happening as we speak. I am not at liberty to go into details, so I'll just tell you that right up front here. I'm not authorized to do so, and I really wish I was, because it's really kind of cool. But at the end of the day, it is going to be good for our customers. from the standpoint of the build and some of the other builds that we haven't done yet, we're going to be able to do. So that's about all I can say at this point, but it is going to be an 18-month process and move through that process there. But here's where we are on the slide there. The green, inside the yellow areas are where we've already built, and we're going to finish building by the end of this year. The rest of the blue lines there that we haven't built yet, that is what I am guessing will be positively impacted by this acquisition. And so we'll be able to finish out the build, not just here in Solvang, which is the pink area, but throughout the entire region there. And we can come back to that slide if you have questions about that later. Here's what's interesting. Now, we have the pricing there. This is not supposed to be commercial, so I won't get through this slide quickly, but everything from, I added the fiber 200 because the Affordable Act went away. And so we wanted something so that folks who couldn't afford more would be able to get this. So we added the 200, but I have the 500. There's the gig, 2 gigs, 5 gigs, and now 7 gigs and such. What we have done is we've divorced ourselves from the video content, meaning you don't have to use our services. You don't have to buy a plan that gives you 6,000 channels of which you watch 6. You don't have to do that. You can stream what you want, which saves saves my family a lot of money doing it that way. And so that's what we're offering right now. Once again, now this is focused on homes. Quite a few businesses could use that service, but we also have the service for the businesses. And as we're building out, we're already passing by many of those businesses. And so those folks who want to get off copper can get into fiber. We'll be able to help them out with that as well. Next slide. Questions? I don't know how long this took me, but hopefully that was a record. I'm here to answer any questions you guys might have, and hopefully I'll have good answers.
Anybody in the council have any questions?
I have
Yes.
a comment. When you were mayor, I was living in Canyon Lake, and we always thought you did a good job in Marietta.
Can I have that in writing? No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You were in Canyon Lake?
And
Have we met before?
No.
Oh, we should have. Okay. Well, good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Doug, I had a question. The fiber technology is not anything new. Does this compete with broadband or the Starlink type systems?
Very much so. The fiber itself, the cabling, the glass that is what the light goes through, that's been around. I mean, that was around in at least 2004 when we put it in Marietta. And it's been there before, but what has changed is the technology that feeds those wires. That allows us to put it through faster and faster. That's mainly what's changing, and it's a future-proof technology that allows us just to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to speeds. And when Verizon came to me in 2004, they described that the copper capacity was like the size of maybe a garden hose, if you can imagine that. But what they were bringing in at 50 megs was the size of a 10-foot culvert in comparison. I don't have a clue what 7 gigs, what size that culvert is. That's huge. But the idea here is with all what's needed now, you watch the AI stuff coming up now and everything else, they need more and more capacity. For gamers, they need more and more capacity. For those of us in business, we need more and more capacity. And so that's why these 2 gigs, 5 gigs, 7 gig offerings are being offered. What became extremely obvious was after COVID and through COVID, when people started working from home, it was more and more important that they had the capacity and the internet so they could do that, work from home. Well, what has happened as a result is there are several folks who work remotely. We have stories of folks who, in the Bay Area, who have moved to Bishop because they can get 7 gigs in their home and get in Bishop and be able to work from home from there, and they just drop in the office in the Bay Area so often. So it allows for a quality of life as well. So, no, the technology with the wires is not new, but the technology that feeds the wires is new, and it's game-changing.
Thank you.
That was a long answer to a short question, sorry.
A couple of questions, if I may. I was looking at your map with all of the lines on there, and the blue lines it lists as the existing, that's the new fiber build.
Yeah.
And the orange lines are existing fiber. Belonging to somebody else, not
This
Frontier?
belongs to us. Some of the existing fiber may have actually been built by Verizon in the Verizon days, back in the Fios days. But that was existing fiber that was here before this build. And so now what we're adding is new fiber that ideally will feed the entire city.
Well, I understand that the Chumash from the casino have a fiber that comes down to their 2 hotels here in town, the Cork and the Hudson, and they've had that for quite a while. I don't know who put that in.
I don't know for sure. I'm pretty sure it was us. Because basically when you see the new fiber like that, it usually is to feed a business. That's a whole different process to get it to the end user. And it's not what we're doing here is called FTTH, fiber to the home. But the businesses are an enterprise discussion, and they can have that done anytime. And so typically those businesses have paid for that for us to bring the fiber there. So I'm guessing that's us from a long time ago, when it was probably when it was Verizon. I can't guarantee that's true.
Yeah, don't know. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
The Santa Barbara County of Associated Governments, SBCAG, has been pushing the broadband initiative.
Yep.
And I presume this is part of that broadband?
Nope. We are involved in that. I have a whole team that works with the different consortiums around the state working with grants and all those things to do middle mile and last mile.
Right.
But this is a private venture. Frontier is using private money. Frontier, it's a business and such. And so we're already involved. Frontier is what's called the ILEC. We're the phone company in all these places that we're going to. So basically we're upgrading our existing infrastructure as a phone company. And so that has nothing to do with those initiatives, but it's very complementary to it, because ideally if we're upgrading our phone systems in essence to the fiber, and then there's this section afterwards, which is the middle mile or the last mile discussion, we cooperate with the consortiums so we can just do it all, make that happen. So that's what the discussions that we have at this point.
Well, that was my understanding, was the fiber optics were going to be placed throughout the county. I don't know beyond the county, but I've seen the maps for the distribution and the last mile to get it to some of the more remote areas, so that everybody, I mean, it became obvious during COVID that the kids couldn't go to school.
Right.
They had to have internet, and if they didn't have internet, they were at a disadvantage. So they're trying to remedy that with this broadband initiative.
And it's honorable to do so, I believe. But it's a matter of, at this point, what we're focused on is getting it to everyone. But as a private company, our stockholders don't want us to lose money. And so it has to pencil. And where it doesn't pencil, we're cooperating with the consortiums and for all the grant and everything else, so that we can make it pencil, so we can get it to those places where sometimes we're going miles to get to 20 customers.
Right.
And so that's where we cooperate and work together with those.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it, sir.
Any chance that I get to come to Solvang, I'm always happy to do so. So let me know when I come back.
Okay,
Y'all take care.
thanks.
Thank you. And now we have the PERS liability
So we have
presentation.
PERS liability, but I don't see him online yet. I've just texted him to ask him where he is, and I don't have a response yet. So Julio Morales from Cosmont, I met him at a conference I was at about a year ago. I had some interesting things to say. He presented to the Budget Ad Hoc Committee earlier this year.
Right.
And given the current state of affairs with the PERS costs continuing to escalate, I thought it was a good opportunity to present to council. And that way you have some knowledge and might end up with some direction out of it. So that's kind of where we're at, but I don't see him online and he hasn't responded to my text. I know he knows about this because he emailed me earlier today and says, "What's the link?" Because he's going to connect by Zoom. So he either didn't get my email or something happened, but
Well, Cosmont's done a fair amount of work with the city, haven't they?
I don't know about with our city. I know they do multiple
They
jurisdictions.
do a lot of stuff around, yeah.
So, yeah, been around a while.
Okay.
So if we can move forward, and then if he reaches out to me, I'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll go on then to our next, which is public communications. So at this time, you can address the council on any items not on the agenda or on the consent listing. The time limit is 3 minutes. We'll start with in-person public comments first. So let's start with Cynthia Matthews. Dr. Matthews, you're up, please. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. I promise I'll be nice. First off, I wanted to thank all of you for coming and meeting with us and taking your time. We really appreciated each of you coming and hearing us and what we had to say. That means a lot because that means that you're engaging in the community and you are very concerned about our concerns as well. And that being said, so I understand that it's been deemed incomplete and there's going to be another process for that. One of the things I would like to highlight on that is that the original incomplete letter should have had a request for title reports on Lot 7 as well as Lots 3 and 4. The developer should have been required to supply, as a part of the report for the 3 lots, and show who the other 18 co-owners are in common. That's a note of concern because none of that was on there. There was no signatures of any acknowledgement from the other 18. I believe there's only one that actually signed off. And he's attempting or wanting to, which would constitute about 20% of the land that the developer does not own. And so we're seeking that, or requesting that that should be part of what he has to supply to the city. Acknowledgement letters, okaying the use. And again, tomorrow I've made an appointment to go ahead and review some of the environmental impact reports or whatever he's updated. So I'll have a lot more questions in the next meeting, I'm sure. But again, thank you so much for all that you are doing for Solvang. I do know that you do care about your community and ours. And look forward to meeting with you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dennis Beebe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dennis Beebe, Solvang, and thank you, council members, for your continuing service to our community. I thought Cynthia was going to steal my thunder, but she didn't. This is the first public admission that we have formed a nonprofit, tax-exempt corporation called San Ynez Valley Citizens Council, not City Council, but Citizens Council. I currently serve as vice president. And our role or our mission is to preserve the quality of life and the rural character of the San Ynez Valley. So if there's an inappropriate development that has a negative impact on those, we will oppose it. And speaking of Site C, the notice of incomplete that was issued by your planning manager back in April required the developer, as Cynthia said, to submit title reports on 2 properties that were not owned by the developer. So, 90 days later, the developer submitted his latest version of what he is now calling Wildwood. And he did not submit the 2 title reports that he did not own and that were requested by the planning manager. So the 30-day review period was completed by planning staff, and they issued another notice of incomplete. That was done 10 days ago, 30 August. So a lot of us looked at the list of items which represented omissions and the need for updates. The 2 title reports that had been requested in April no longer were listed in the incomplete letter of 10 days ago, even though they were never submitted. In fact, the developer said in his submission, the applicant is of the view that this request is inappropriate and unnecessary. Your planning manager must have agreed with that, because when he issued his notice of incomplete on 30 August, he didn't include the need for the same title reports that he'd requested in April. How can that be an element of incompleteness in April, but all of a sudden not an element of incompleteness in August? We don't understand. So he must have agreed with the developer. We, the San Ynez Valley Citizens Council, think the planning manager was wrong. He's wrong 10 days ago. He was wrong a year ago when the developer first submitted his preliminary application.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Dan Martin?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and other city council members, my name is Dan Martin. I am still a lifelong resident of the San Ynez Valley. In March of this year, a letter was sent to the Solvang city attorney and copies given to the city council members and staff. The letter being from Mark Shatillo, who was writing on behalf of Mission Oaks Homeowners Association and a number of co-owners of the common areas on which is now planned for the easement for Wildwood development. Mr. Shatillo's letter stated that because application for the Westwood development required consent from all property owners for use of the land of this easement and was not done, it should have been disqualified. Government Code 6594 was stated in Mr. Shatillo's letter, but to this date, Mr. Shatillo has not received any response from the city. That has been 5 months with no answer to this question. At least that's what I'm aware of at this point. On May 2nd of this year, the Solvang Planning Department sent a notice of incomplete to the developer stating a full title report is required to determine that signatures of all property owners of this easement property have not been collected. On August 30th of this year, the notice of incomplete application did not mention needing the signatures of the additional owners of this property, and these owners have still not been contacted for their signatures. The developer failed to provide this information, claiming this information was inappropriate and unnecessary. The 17 property owners in Mission Oaks do not agree with this developer's attitude. The Wildwood development is flawed, and I hope the City Council and Planning Department recognize this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Pelcher?
Hello, my name's Robert Pelcher. You might remember me from last week. I came to talk to you about the speeding in the so-called corridor. This has actually been an ongoing problem. I actually came to this council a couple of years ago and talked about this same problem. And I told them what happened. I talked to a sheriff at that time and asked him if there's any way they could patrol the area with radar. The sheriff at that time told me they don't have radar, and the only way they can catch people for speeding around town is they have to actually get behind them, tail them, and clock their speed. So when I said this, one of the council members, I don't know exactly who it was, says, well, there is one radar gun in the county and maybe only one person that's authorized to use it. Maybe we should look into getting more people authorized. And they're going to look into it. Well, here it's a couple years later, and I'm still coming to these meetings, and I'm still talking about the same subject. And the only thing I've seen is paint on the road and the effort that you guys are doing, which, you know, I give you credit for trying to do something, is the speed signs. But really what it basically boils down to is there's no enforcement of the speed around this town. And everybody around town is starting to realize this. And I got here the report that the sheriff gives you guys about citations and that stuff that was issued. It was back from May of this year. As of May of this year, only 14 citations have been issued total. The year before, a total of only 24 citations. That's 2 a month. I see at least that 7, 8 times a day on my street. I mean, it infuriates me because there's nothing we can do. And that's why I come to you, because I feel you are the ones that the sheriff has to answer to. You're the ones that I can only go to and try to get the sheriff to do his job. But the basic problem is there's no enforcement going on. As in fact, there's another story I have to tell you. It happened to a neighbor of mine across the street from their house. They live in Skeet Mesa. It's on Pistache. A car went around the corner, didn't stop at the stop sign. I think it was Solvang Mesa onto Pistache. Slid off the road, went up into the neighbor's yard, tore up their artificial grass. They called the sheriff. The sheriff came out. My friend overheard the sheriff telling this person, please do not file a report. Don't file it. Trying to talk him out of filing a report. If the sheriff is talking people out of filing reports, how are we going to ever know of incidents that are happening? It's just sad. But I just wish you guys could do something to get enforcement. I would like to see a stop sign at the corner of Elsinore and Solvang, Chalk Hill Road. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else in the, yes, sir, Mr. Martin?
My name's Stephen Martin, and I live at 698 Hillside Drive here in Solvang. And I wanted to address the council first to say thank you for your work. And again, thanks for coming to talk to us, those of you who are candidates, talking to some of the citizens. But I specifically wanted to mention tonight that I think many other citizens, and I'm sure the council, is worried about and concerned about the real possibility of expensive litigation over Wildwood's proposal. People have addressed tonight the timeline which has taken place. And I want to just say that to avoid litigation, one has to negotiate and communicate promptly and courteously and in good faith, and even try mediation or other discussions to come to a mutually beneficial conclusion without litigation. It doesn't always work, but it's certainly worth trying. And one of the things that I think is very important is to be very prompt and responsive to communication between the parties, among the parties, and between council. Our understanding is, as was mentioned tonight, we know a letter was sent in March of this year to the city from council representing 18 people. And our understanding is that tonight, perhaps in executive session, is the first time that letter has been discussed with council members for possible response or action. And I don't think that that's the best way to avoid litigation. I think waiting 6 months to even discuss a letter and make council fully aware and give the legal opinion of the legal staff to council is just avoiding the issue, but not really working to solve it. Litigation is expensive. You know that. It's going to be expensive to the parties, including the developer and the citizens. It's going to be expensive to the council, or the city, I should say. And that means expensive again to us, who are your constituents. We would like you to do everything possible to avoid the litigation. And I urge you to be prompt in response to council's communication, to make suggestions about negotiations, possibly mediation, and trying to work out solution so that the concerns of the citizens about this development can be brought to bear along with the concerns that developer has to make money, and that maybe a mutually beneficial conclusion can be reached on this without us spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and time, perhaps years, in litigation. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else that wants to speak? I don't see anybody on Zoom, so we'll bring it back to council. Okay, at this point, city manager's report. Did you hear back from the gentleman at Cosmont?
I have not yet, no.
Okay, city manager's report, please.
So if he is unable to reach out or reach me this evening, we'll reschedule it for a future meeting. Other items on the future agenda include a legislative update by our Cal Cities representative, Dave Molinex. That will be at the next meeting.
Good.
Talking about items on the governor's desk waiting signature, other impacts of other statewide legislative, pending things on the ballot, et cetera. We'll also be to have a pavement management discussion in October. They'll be bringing back the deflection test results. Roger, the Public Works Director, will be discussing that and kind of what that means for ongoing pavement maintenance around the community. So those are a couple of upcoming things that will be before the council. I did want to mention two things. I got a letter today from the county of Santa Barbara's architectural review notice of public hearing, which will occur on this Friday at 9 a.m. at Sandy Inez CSD office on Faraday. And they're going to be, it's a Board of Architectural Review, and one of the items on is about a couple of Verizon issues. We've put this posted this notice on our website. It is also on the County Board of Architectural Review website, but I thought it might be of interest to some of our community, larger community in particular, regarding Verizon at Gardner Ranch. So I haven't really done any research other than the fact that I got the notice today, and I thought I would share it. Another issue, another item I wanted to share with the community is we were requested by a group of youth called Young American Foundation to place flags on the veterans' lawn for 9/11 remembrance of the approximate, a little less than 3,000 lives that were lost. So they will be placing a flag representing, they'll have the roughly 3,000 flags out there for the day on 9/11, which is obviously coming up in 2 days. So I did want to share that with the council and with the larger community. When they see all the flags, that's what it's about.
They're going to put them up and then take them?
Yeah, there's small flags in the lawn is what my understanding is. They'll
Okay.
be aerating the lawn for us with the flags.
Just everybody's lawn, just veterans' lawn?
Just the Veterans Hall lawn.
Okay.
So there'll be 2,900, 2,800, what, I don't remember the number, a little less than 3,000 lives were lost on 9/11 in
nice.
the various incidents. And they have asked permission to place these flags on the Veterans Hall lawn, and I gave them permission.
Thank you.
And that's all I have for now.
Questions or comments on the city manager's report? Okay, in that case, let's go to the general report out for council comments and requests. Anybody have anything they wanted to say about what's going on? Elizabeth, you've got the microphone.
No, I have a report out, but not a comment. I'll wait.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to report out that I attended 2 GSA meetings over the last couple of weeks. The first on August 28th. I attended the Eastern Management Area GSA. We hired a law firm, an executive director, and an engineering firm for the work that we are going to be doing for the basin that Solvang participates in for sustainability of our water, our underground water. And we appointed the new committee leadership this past session. And so I'll be serving as treasurer and secretary of the committee and continue my role on the committee. And then I also participated in the 3 GSA basin-wide Eastern, Central, and Western Management Area convenience of the JPAs, the 3 different JPAs, and all the leadership convened in a single meeting, mainly to discuss the expenditures and the plans and the hiring of consultants to manage our grant funding that was awarded to the entire basin, and how we will spend it over the next couple of years. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Turn your microphone on.
Okay. I wanted to comment, I want to compliment staff and the power washing the sidewalks that they're doing. It's a very nice, it's noticeable, and I hope they can keep up with that. And I don't have a problem with it being done in-house as opposed to having contracts for that. Because they're doing just as good a job as what our vendors would do. I just hope that they have the ability to do it more frequently and greater coverage of areas. Then finally, I wanted to put add to our council code of conduct to include our attire to be specified as professional business attire at meetings, as opposed to, there was, in the past, there've been, if you will, not even business casual, but lazy attire, if you will, non-professional to the people we represent should be, accept nothing but the best.
He's not talking about you.
No, I think all of us.
No, the green hair doesn't count.
Professional attire. What color hair you have doesn't matter to me. But I'd like to see us put that into our code of conduct.
I think he doesn't have an issue with this council, but he's looking at
Not with this
history.
Not with this
for
council.
future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Thank you. I have a couple of report outs real quick. The city manager and I went to the Toast Nonprofit Community last Friday, I think it was, Thursday. It was hotter than blazes, and we're in sport coats because we thought it was professional. That was a mistake. Okay. I was also there is a Viking ship playground item that was built at the San Ynez Valley School, the grade school here. Very cool looking. It's designed for any grade child, handicapped or everything else. It's just an amazing thing. They had a ribbon cutting, so I was at the ribbon cutting for that. My wife and I took a tour of the burn area out at Sedgwick Reserve. If you're not aware, Sedgwick Reserve is about a 6,000 acre reserve that's run by the UCSB. 3,000 acres burned in that last fire, and so my wife and I went out with the manager there and took a look at that to see what the fire department had done and what a wonderful job they did in stopping that fire on the reserve. So I wanted to kudos to the fire department and the people at the reserve that handled things. Also attended a San Ynez Valley Aquatics Informational Kickoff. If you're not aware of this, the San Ynez Valley High School is trying to raise the funds to put in a competition grade swimming pool on the school grounds. And they actually have the pool. It's a stainless steel pool they've got stored in some storage area. It's huge. And they need to put it in the ground and put the water and all that stuff. So they're raising money. I think the total they need is about $8 million to get everything done, and they've got 2, 3, 4 million. I don't remember the numbers now. Anyway, I went to the informational kickoff for that with a lot of interesting people. It was very nice. And that's it. Yes, sir.
I got stuff.
You got
Yeah, if
stuff.
you've ever been, if you understand water polo, San Ynez and Paso Robles are the only two schools in the world that have a shallow end. And so they actually play water polo with a shallow end. You just can't touch the bottom. A couple things. I'm currently, as of now, a board member on the board of directors of the Santa Barbara County Taxpayers Association. If you are not all aware of Young American Foundation, or YAF, it's one of the most wonderful things that young people can go through, mostly for high school age kids from all over the country that come to visit Santa Barbara and learn about civic duties and how governments work, et cetera. It's a 2 or 3 day thing. They do it almost many weekends a year. Not to brag, but my kids have been able to meet Governor George Allen and John Gruden and Ben Shapiro. They have different speakers on the left and on the right. At all times, it's just an outstanding, anything that Young American Foundation does is wonderful. And then finally, I want to put something on the agenda. I've sat on this dais since 2011, 2012, as a planning commissioner and a council person, and some of the complaints that I hear from 2011-12 are the complaints that I hear now about Solvang not being business-friendly enough from business owners and builders, et cetera. Some of the first things that I dealt with on the Planning Commission were people having problems with permitting. I think our planning department, we are definitely on the right track. It's wonderful that we have Raphael here. We're making progress, and I hear it from people in the valley. But I'm tired of businesses getting roadblocks to getting things done in this town. And the better for business, the more money we have in the general fund. So what I would like to do is to put on the agenda that we spend some time looking into making a professional guidebook for business owners and builders as a checklist to what they need for signs, what they need for colors, what they need for permitting, and actually spend some money and make a thorough guidebook for business owners in the valley and builders in the valley. And I would like to eliminate the DRC. We don't need to slow things down. You know, it's dollars and cents, and I don't agree with the way things are going now. So I would like to have that put on the council if anybody else agrees with me.
Okay, so at this point in time, we have to ask if he wants to put this on the agenda that we all agree or disagree. Let's take this in two parts. One is a document that defines for a builder what their requirements are for permitting and signage and things of that nature. All of those, anybody opposed to that?
Well, I think a guidebook is going to open us up for more iteration, dispute. I think you open yourself up for a lot of
If I can interject.
lack of. It's better to be just like put it forward in a
If I
formal
can-
We're
process.
discussing this now. We should.
Yeah, if I can interject, I think the only question is whether we want to discuss it in the future, not the merits of the proposition at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. So, anybody opposed to putting it on a future agenda? Then if we would, please. The second request was putting on the agenda the dissolving, is
If we
that
could
the
get this
good word?
guidebook done, we wouldn't need the DRC.
I would disagree, well, okay, we can't comment. So the question is, does anybody disagree with the idea of putting on the agenda the dissolution of the DRC?
Yeah,
I
I don't
do.
think there's a need to do that.
I don't think we need to do that.
The objective is to, I think having that discussion is just where we would decide whether or not it would be worthwhile. Anything that makes it business-friendly, that's the objective, and do we get to that point when we shouldn't kill an idea before it's discussed, and I'd like to see it on the agenda for that discussion.
Okay, so I got 1, 2 positive. You, yes or no for you? Put it on
I'm
the
open
agenda?
to, putting it on the agenda, and then we can talk about it then.
Okay, that's 3-2. That has suggested we put that on the future agenda that we discuss the DRC's future. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Item number 6, the consent items. Madam Clerk, if you'd present that to the record, please.
Thank you. Consent is for routine administrative city matters and is approved with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak during public communications portion of this agenda.
Okay, at this point, is there anybody on the council want to pull something on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
I'd like to pull item 6D, please, which is the resolution for the reimbursement. I'd like to have a little discussion on that, and then proceed after we discuss a couple of items.
Any others? No. In that case, can I have a motion to approve the consent items without item 6D?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent items minus D.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Rona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, then you need a discussion on item 6D. Can we have a staff report on that, please? D is in dog,
Delta.
or David.
Delta.
Delta.
So as I wrote in the staff report, we are working toward replacement of our wastewater treatment plant. One of the funding options available to us, so obviously we could borrow money, we can save a bunch of money and eventually get there. Another way to borrow is and we were looking for grants and other things, and none of that seemed to be working out. So one of the other options is related to borrowing the funds is bonds. And in order to be able to include some of the costs associated, particularly the preliminary things.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but really my whole objection is to this whole thing is not what's in here, it's what's not in here. It's, this is a one-time thing because we mentioned the wastewater treatment. I think we should have this policy for all borrowing, and that's what I'm trying to propose, is that
see.
it's only, this is a one off-the-shelf project, but future things, we should also be reimbursed for those. And this only relates to the one project, which is wastewater treatment. That's where I was going with it. I have no objection to what we have, except that I think it's too narrow. It should include all future borrowings.
Right, just to clarify, though, we have to wait until we know what those projects are, because we're on a limited reimbursement. Without the resolution, we're not allowed to get reimbursed for the costs that we've already spent. So it's like a per debt item. We can't just do a blanket one for everything.
Okay. That's just,
All right.
all right.
In that case,
Yeah.
can we have a motion to approve item 6D as in Delta?
Yeah, I'll move to approve item 6D.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes?
Councilmember Claudia Arona?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Monte?
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you.
So my
Sure.
presentation has arrived. It was delayed due to some technical difficulties, and of course, my computer turned off because it's been so long. So, as I mentioned a while ago, I met Julio at a function about a year ago. We discussed the idea about what we potentially could do to reduce our PERS liability, possibly eliminate it altogether, at least ongoing. I mean, the old stuff, the ongoing will always be there. But, Julio, you want to take it away? I've got it pulled up here.
You've got 3 minutes.
Yeah. Make it quick. I want to go watch the 49ers.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. My apologies. I'm in a conference and I had to actually change rooms. So finally, hopefully it works. So if we can bring up the presentation, if you don't mind. My name is Julio Morales. I work for Cosmont Financial Services. We are a municipal advisor or a financial advisor. One of my areas of expertise is pension and financial advice related to CalPERS pension liability. So we can go to the first slide real quickly. We wanted to give you a little bit of background on your CalPERS pension liability, and I think Randy talked about it. Wanted to really explain how a CalPERS defined benefit pension fund works. You, the city, makes payments to CalPERS, and they invest it. Now, I think this is important because people believe they have a retirement with CalPERS. And what makes CalPERS a little unique is that most people think of their retirement as their own individual retirement and it's growing at one point. But CalPERS is a dynamic system. One, it really is an investment manager and a plan administrator. So it takes the monies that you provide to them, it invests it, hopes to grow those in the future for current employees, but also has to make payments to its current retirees. And I think that's important, and if we can go to now, those payments, by the way, are on what we call defined benefits. So it's a formula. And there's two general formulas. One is what they call PEPRA, the new formula that they had after pension reform in 2013, which is 2% at 62. So, for example, if you've had 10 years in the CalPERS system or 10 years with the city, 2% times 10 is 20%. So you get 20% of your average of the three highest years of your salary. So, for example, if you were earning $100,000, you would get an annuity equivalent to approximately $20,000. The other is 2% at 55, and that is the old, what we call classic payment. And the same formula, but just you do it at an earlier age. But when you think about it, you get 5 years less of payments that go into the system in 5 year, more of payments that go out to the retirees. So it's a more expensive system. So you should remember classic and PEPRA. PEPRA is the new formula that is you retire at a later date. So next, any questions? The reason I brought that up, and I think it's important, is you have to understand that CalPERS is a diversified investment portfolio. Many people ask how CalPERS, what return they had that year, and they compare it to the stock market. And the reason I started with this example was to illustrate that it's really like a portfolio of different assets. And when you look at this breakup here, you see that only a portion of it is in equities or stocks. A certain portion is a fixed income. There's private equity, there's real estate, and other types of assets. So it's a fully diversified portfolio. And the number that's important to keep in mind is all of their projections are based on a discount rate, or really an investment hurdle, of 6.8%. So you see that right there? That's the portfolio mix. So I think it's always important for you to keep in mind, you can't have it all in equities because you have to pay out a significant portion to current retirees. So part of your check has to be stable that you're sending out to make payments on a monthly basis, and the other part is for growth. Any questions at that point? Okay, next slide, if I may. So when you think of this, it's important to see how much of the CalPERS dollar that you're paying out comes from investment earnings versus what is paid by the employees, which is about 11 cents on the dollar, what's paid by cities, and these are on average 33 cents on the dollar, and then the remainder of that portion comes from investment earnings. So investment earnings is pretty significant, and this works like any other insurance company, that you're hoping that there's growth that's going to fund growth and investment over time that's going to fund a significant portion of your required payouts. So next slide. Okay. What's important, and I'll go over a little bit of history because I think a lot of people start to ask, how to get so big? How do we get here? So if you see this payout ratio, you can see back in the day that CalPERS was a much better funded portfolio. And over time, there have been some decisions, and I'll go over what those decisions are. And frankly, now there's a disparity between what you owe, or what the actuaries project you owe, and that value of your assets. In other words, you're underfunded. So this slide, by the way, and the prior slide, both come from CalPERS. So this is their projection. But if we can go to the next slide, I'm going to get a little bit, next slide, please. Going to get a little bit more detail as to how your CalPERS liability works. So it's important that there are really two payments. One is called the normal cost, and the other one, and I hate to mention these acronyms, is your unfunded accrued liability. A simple way of thinking about it is the normal cost is your current bill that you pay as a percentage of payroll. CalPERS tells me you have this many employees, you have to pay a percentage of payroll, like 15%. However, if you remember the slide before, I showed you that you are behind in your funding. So what CalPERS did to every agency in California is they put you on a payment plan. Previously, they had you on a 30-year rolling plan, which if you think of the sound of that, it means you would have really never paid off your payments. It's kind of making your minimum payments on your credit card. Well, CalPERS has everyone on a payment plan to hopefully pay off your payments over the next 20 to 25 years. So we're going to focus on the amount on the right, though it's important because if you, for some reason, just as an illustration, eliminated every employee, the blue would go away. If you outsourced every employee, the blue would go away, but you would still have that past due payment because you are still legally obligated to pay your retirees and also current employees what they've earned to date. So if you had no employees going forward, you'd still have that orange that you have to pay off. I think, Randy, you're going to have to go through a couple, enter a couple times, because I think there's an active slide on here. My apologies. Yeah, I think you have to press it 2 more times. So there you go. Now I'm just basically going to the same components that we talked about. You have the base salary, you have the employee share and employer share of normal costs that are in blue, and then you have the UAL in orange. So that, and as you see, the UAL comes out to the amount we have listed there, and that's what we're here to focus. You have a very small safety plan, and remind me, Randy, were they all retired now? And that's a residual part, correct?
Yeah, we don't have any current safety employees.
Right, so that's the residual part. and what you have today really focusing on the miscellaneous plan. And I'm going to get any questions at this point. When you look at you see the top line tells you what you estimate your liability is. The second line is just what the market value of the assets are. On June 30th every year, the actuary tells you what that amount is, and they value your asset, and the difference is your unfunded liability. And that's what we're here to address. Now remember, they take that unfunded liability and put you on a payment plan. So I hope we're going to get a little bit deeper into the little details and then talk about some solutions real quickly. Any questions at this point? Okay. So I think it's important to understand that I never use the phrase fix your pension liability. It's a dynamic liability that each and every year gets adjusted. And it gets adjusted really for two major issues. One is investment return. Remember, we started at the top of the conversation about that 6.8% investment yield. And the other is what we call demographic changes. So people retire earlier, they die earlier, they live longer, their disabilities, all those type of different changes. There are also other adjustments, the discount rate, changes in assumptions. So you'll see what we call amortization bases. Every year, CalPERS adjusts your payment stream. And you'll see each of these kind of have a year to them and a reason. Some years you get credits if you have positive investment return, which is what happened in 2021. But then you also notice the next year after they had the 21.3% return, they also had a 6.1% loss. So it's a dynamic liability and it places you where you are today. Now, really the way you should look at your CalPERS liability is they put you on these little loan programs. So each one of those amortization bases is an individual loan, and they have a payment over a certain term. I don't know if you can see on the slide that some are 12 years, some are 19 years, but they're all at 6.8% with slightly different terms. So that gets you to the next slide, and hopefully the easier one to understand, is that each one of those bases really are what we call a layer in a cake. And when you really think about addressing this series of payments that you're going to have, you're on a payment plan that looks like the dotted line, but you would work strategically to figure out if you want to have a cash flow impact or a maximum savings impact. So a shorter base, a shorter loan, you have larger payments but lower amounts, and a longer loan, a long-term loan or amortization base, you pay more interest over time. So depending on what you're seeking to do, you eat one of those specific layers in the cake. You make a payment to CalPERS for all or a portion of that layer cake. Any questions at this point? So if I recall, we talked about what the impact is, and this is the aggregate of what your payments were. So before 2020, you were in the orange. Now you're at 2021 in the gray. 22, 21 you're in the orange, and 20 you were the purple. What really happened is that many agencies had a great return in 21, that 21.3% return. I don't think as many were aware that you had that immediate 6.1% loss thereafter. But what those are, and this is important, these are fixed dollar payments that you're required to make. So it has a pretty significant impact on your budget. And I believe that is why Randy started to have this conversation with me. He knew not only next year, but the following years, those payments continue to go up. And you see they peak around 2035. Those will have a dramatic impact on your operating budget. Any questions at this point? Oh, I wanted to go one over thing and this is important, I was going to go over how we kind of got here, because people are like, my God, that's a big number. How are we at $6 million? How did we get here? And the League of Cities commissioned the study in 2018. And most people believe that the reason they're here is investment losses. But in reality, it's because of enhanced and retroactive benefits. There's also a cost of living adjustment. There's life expectancy that went up. And also the contribution pattern. So it's not just one thing. There's been several things over the past 20 years. But if we can go to the next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you may.
When you
Can
said
we go
20
back to that
years, did a lot of this change under Gray Davis?
Gee, I'm that old to tell you under Gray Davis. Yes, it did.
I figured.
Yeah. And it's not, aside from your politics, I don't think it's Gray Davis. I'd actually like to point to the unions. And you're really prescient because
It's a
that's
combination.
exactly what happened. If you see right there, SB 400 and AB 616, back at the dot-com era where the market was flush and CalPERS was 140% funded. So what the state highway union requested is to increase their benefits from 2% at 50 to 3% at 50. And they basically said, look, our pension fund is flush, we have 140%, but remember that's a paper profit, not real monies. And they got that change. And then the next year, AB 616 happened for the miscellaneous employees. Now, what happened thereafter is all the local municipalities followed suit. So this happened across the state. They're like, if we don't increase these benefits, then we're going to lose employees to the neighboring city, and we have to match the changes that happened at the state level. So if you see my red box when the problem started, and you see it at the top that it was kind of 140% funded, when the cities adopted this, the dot-com crash happened, and the market was well below. But in all honesty, I'm not trying to point fingers, the train had already left the station. The promises were made to the bargaining units, people were trying to match that, but no one contributed to the system. So they were hoping that the investment gains would actually fund the 30 to 50% increase in benefits that you had given away. Now remember, I said they were enhanced and retroactive benefits, and that's where it really killed. The way the legislation was written and the way the benefits were provided, that if you had an employee who'd been working there 30 years, they had retroactive benefits. So the increase from 2% to 3% was effective retroactively. So you essentially paid out for an employee 50% more on day 2, and they didn't pay a penny into the system. And if you continue to see this chart, you've seen that we've had some bull runs, significant ones, but that orange line never goes really past 80%. So we were hoping that investment gains would save us, but in reality, we have not been able to account for that. And it makes sense when you think about it. You increased your benefits, didn't put any additional money into the system, and hoped that investment earnings would make it up. But we've had a couple of downturns, and the fact that there were retroactive benefits made it very difficult. So if we can go back a slide, if you don't mind, Randy, just to reiterate. Retroactive and enhanced benefits are what really put the system in balance. Investment losses made it worse, but you also have COLA, you have benefits, and then life expectancy exceeded. So it's been kind of a continuum of multiple factors, but I think the most significant one is the enhanced and most important retroactive benefits that we gave away. Now, if we go to that next slide, once again, it's important to note that you're in the same boat that every other municipality in California is in. Everyone gave away similar benefits. Everyone enhanced those benefits. So it's not anything that's unique, and I think that's probably the worst part, because there was this pressure that if we don't provide these same benefits, we're going to have a hard time recruiting employees. And that's a likely component to that. Any questions on this kind of history lesson? I think it's important because I get it from a lot of council members. They want to know how we got here and what's the root cause. And I think it's, when you really think about it, it's difficult to have a fully funded pension plan when you increase your benefits 25 to 40%.
No, we made it difficult because this is a one-party state.
I'm looking at it, council member, strictly from a financial perspective, but it may be right. The unions are certainly the impact on this. You're absolutely right. I'm just looking at it, what the impact of the unions, or we did have pension reform, and that has helped a little bit. But the problem, from my perspective, is that the problem happened 25 years ago, and the deal that was cut in 2013 to help reduce pensions was one that the deal was, we're going to reduce the benefits going forward, but all the agencies have to take care of the past due bill. So I'm trying, your point is well taken, certainly there's some imbalances that happen in the system, but it's a liability that every municipality is stuck with. People often ask me, by the way, if you can get out of CalPERS. And you can pay a one-time termination payment and be out of the CalPERS system. But typically it's 2 or 3 times the amount of your liability.
Yeah, that was
So
floated here back in 2018-19.
Yeah. And that isn't like it isn't, this is the next question, but that is a payment you have to make, so they assume all the liability going forward. There isn't a penalty like a lot of people think. It's just CalPERS says, okay, I'm going to take all your payment, put it in bonds, and not have to worry about making payments going forward. So the second point, if I may, and this is a great point when you talk about kind of the politics, a solution at the legislature came by changing the benefit formula down to what they call PEPRA. Remember, I talked about 2% at 55, down to 2% at 62, and requiring employees to also pay a portion of the benefits. So now a lot of all the new employees hired after 2013 are what we call PEPRA employees. And I think that's important to note because right now I think the workforce on average in California is somewhere around 50-60% are PEPRA. But over the next 10 or 15 years, the majority of the workforce is going to convert to PEPRA employees. But many agencies like yourself will still have fixed dollar payments that go on well beyond that crossover date where 90-95% of your employees are PEPRA. I think it's important for the city manager in the future, in 2039, and they're going to say, why am I paying CalPERS these benefits to these retirees who no longer work here? So a thing to keep in the back of your mind is that this is similar to saying, hey, I still have student loans, but my child is 18 or 19 years old. At a certain point, you have to accelerate making these payments so you can afford to make the pay raises and benefits paid to the current employees, not for the past due employees, which started, recall, in 2000. So it's been nearly a quarter of a century that we've had this payment that gets kicked down the road by many agencies. So there's a point that you almost have this crossover date that by 2040 or so, all your employees would have been retired. All the employees who receive those benefits are retired, and now you have a new PEPRA. Almost all your workforce will be PEPRA. Any questions about that? So I hope we can talk about a few pension funding strategies. And really the first and foremost, I talked about not making contributions. The answers are pretty simple. At some point, you have to start making contributions, additional contributions above what you're making now, what you're required to make. You have these fixed dollar payments that you're required to make, but the best thing to do is from reserves, or more specifically, from one-time monies, put a portion of it aside. Develop a policy that talks about, hey, we have $500,000 extra this year. A quarter of that or 50% of that should go to pay down the CalPERS liability. That over time, you'll eventually reduce those payments. Another one is a soft, fresh start. And that notion really is like setting yourself on a schedule. This would be, once again, an internal policy. And you would direct staff to say, we would like to make the payment schedule, instead of 20 years, you make it what it would be like over a 15-year schedule. Oh, my payments go from $800,000 to $1 million, but you do that on a budgetary basis to make sure that if there's something that happens, Randy has the flexibility to only make $150,000 extra in payment, and you need that $50,000 for that emergency repair that you didn't anticipate. So you don't lock yourself into it, but you set a schedule to pay off sooner. This would be similar to taking your 30-year mortgage and learning what a 15-year payment would be, but keeping the 30-year mortgage so you have that flexibility. Another one is a fund exchange. If you somehow had an internal fund, sometimes a workers' comp claim or some kind of reserve fund that you set aside, you could do an internal borrowing or do some kind of internal borrowing with a water fund. I always recommend strategy 4 is establishing a pension stabilization fund, which is many people know as a 115 trust. That should be made to help provide budgetary flexibility. Set some monies aside from something that you don't expect, unexpected loss or gain, or something that happens from a budgetary perspective. What's important about a 115 trust is you can invest the monies outside of the California Investment Code. And note your liabilities are kind of growing at a higher rate as well. They're assuming a portion of that fund will be equity funds. Then you really have two other concepts, a leverage refunding, which is if you have an opportunity to refinance a bond, take those savings and use that to prepay a portion of your liability. A concept called tax exempt exchange, which I'll go over real quickly. And the lastly are pension obligation bonds, which frankly, in this interest rate environment, they don't make sense. You would be borrowing at basically the same rate that your liability is, but locking in a further amount. So those are your general strategies. I think it always makes sense to investigate them, to take a look at developing a plan and adopting a policy. And this should not be paid off in 1 year. This plan may be a 5 or 10-year plan to pay off these liabilities and provide maximum flexibility. But we always encourage you to look at a way to pay it off in full and be 100% funded, which is the goal. Any questions? Next slide. The first thing that we look at is I look at your share of your water fund, and I see that you have some assets that you may be able to at least pay off the share in the water fund, possibly the sewer fund, to help pay that liability off. So that's the first thing we take a look at. We think you have some assets that may be able to at least to pay off. You look at the amount in the OPEB fund and in your pension fund. You look at the percentage and you go, okay, maybe I have some reserves that can pay off that liability. Remember, that liability is a debt at 6.8%. And we think it makes a lot of sense for you to take a look at using excess cash reserves or excess reserves to pay off a portion of that liability. And the same thing would go for the general fund. Can you afford to make certain payments to reduce that liability? You certainly don't have any debts that accrue it at 6.8%. Next slide. So if you recall, I had talked about that layer cake. This is a further illustration that when you make your payments, you have to tell CalPERS whether you want to apply it to a short base or a long base. Or another way to take a look at it is, do you want to have the maximum savings, or are you looking for maximum budgetary impact? And we model this out for you. We work on a strategy and we say, okay, Julio, we'd like to pay $300,000 a year for the next few years. And then we'll model out and tell you what kind of interest cost savings that should theoretically save you. So that's what we call base targeting. As you can see the different colors, you can see the impact depends on which one you choose. Any questions about that? The last strategy, if we can go to the next slide, is this concept called tax-exempt exchange. And I provided some sample savings. But the notion is, to the extent that you have a CIP plan, or let's say, I think, Randy, did you mention a water fund, or was it a sewer capital improvement that you're doing?
It's the wastewater sewer.
The wastewater sewer. Let's say, and how large is that project?
Around 15 million.
Just for the sake of argument, let's say it's 15 million, and you were going to use some portion of reserves, let's say 5 million of that in reserves to pay off. So, we're going to use $10 million of bonds, $5 million in reserves. The idea is that you would take the $5 million in reserves, actually borrow the full amount or bond for that issue, and take the $5 million in cash that you had for a project and give it to CalPERS. Now, some people say, well, Julio, that's simply taking a 6.8% liability and refinancing it at a lower rate. And that's exactly what you're doing. Because the current interest rate for a tax-exempt bond is 3.5%, and the rate that you're paying on your CalPERS liability is 6.8%. So it would cut your interest costs in half and save a considerable amount. Now, you don't have to do it all at once. You could do that $1 million a piece every couple of years. But the idea is developing a plan, strategically addressing it, and thinking about your balance sheet or looking to leverage your balance sheet to pay off your most expensive liability. There are other strategies that you can looking at maintaining the cost expenditure, but I believe you've already done some of those changes. So the other is now looking at paying off your liability. Next slide. So this looks at the potential interest cost savings that you may have from a tax-exempt exchange. Now, that may be a little bit more if the Federal Reserve actually continues to lower rates, and it may be even more attractive. By the way, that 6.8% liability is fixed. So the lower the cost, the more advantageous you can lock in a lower rate. Next slide. I think that was it. Yeah, that was the California rule. That's the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate taking the time. Thank you for bearing with me in changing rooms that I actually had reception in. Are there any questions?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
Does ESG still play a role in CalPERS investing?
I get this question oftentimes. It doesn't have a significant impact. CalPERS is a politically active animal. That is, I don't know any other way of saying it. It's the largest pension fund in the country. But it doesn't have the dramatic impact that people believe. One of the things they really have to do, if I may, if you ask me why CalPERS is in the situation, it is those enhanced and retroactive benefits. The other, and I think it's important if I may provide a little bit of context, back in the 80s, CalPERS was a fixed income, a bond shop, right? Everything were bonds. And then what happened is people said, well, we should take and participate in the equity market. So if you think about this, regardless of the selection of the equity that you make, usually because most people are doing asset strategies, they may choose one or the other. But for the fact that now, think about the suitability of the investment that you're looking at. That now you have government agencies that are inherently risk adverse and now are on the equity roller coaster. And that means your contributions change. So I think part of it is that agencies kind of made a deal saying, great. And the worst thing I think they did is when the market was up, they had paper profits and gave away real dollars.
Yeah.
That's really a difficult part. If you ask me the more important one, the ESG, interesting, often people focused on tobacco, right? And I think their argument was tobacco has significant health impacts and that impacts our economy. But in reality, when they made that investment decision, it wasn't because of the health. That wasn't the argument. If you remember, they had a massive tobacco securitization. This is back when I was in business school, so it was 2000. And they had $1 billion tobacco securitization, if you recall. And I was surprised. I thought the tobacco industry would have been decimated. You know, now they've decided they want to sell, flavored cigarettes. But in reality, they thought it was not a good investment from an investment decision. And frankly, after the lawsuits, I wouldn't disagree. It looked like they were getting these multi-billion-dollar settlements across all these states. And they said that was not an industry that we want to invest in. At least that is the rationale that I understand. Is ESG what's driving this? I would tell you not. If I went through the beginning slide, if you remember that donut hole with the colors, they do a lot of private equity. They do a lot of what they call private debt, so they're trying to diversify a lot of this. The question you didn't ask me is how do we compare to other states? California is in the middle of the pack. If you're in Kentucky or Chicago or New Jersey, you're not going to retire. Some states like Wisconsin do very well. But what I think is really important, the trend that you really should be asking is what is going to happen in the future. And I can tell you this, that I believe we've had significant returns in the equity market for multiple decades now. And that it's not likely that they're going to be sustained in the future. The state of New York has a discount rate of 6%. They lowered it from 7%. And Wilshire and Associates has recommended several times to lower that discount rate. Now note, if they lower the discount rate, it means you don't have to take as many risky investments, but it means you have to pay more. So I think the issue that you're now faced with is you have a liability now, and it may likely continue to grow because I don't know if CalPERS can meet its investment hurdle.
No.
Or you see that you're going to be on a roller coaster ride.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the council? In that case, I'd like to say thank you very much. That was a lot, very much in depth. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So,
Thank you for that.
I guess one of the things I'd like to talk to council about briefly is this is a lot of information. It's particularly poignant during budget time.
Yeah.
So we will continue to have conversations with Julio and have some strategies for council to consider at a future meeting.
It's called tightening our belt even more.
Yeah, we're going to, well, you know what the budget problems are right now. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens. But yes, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Julio.
Thank you.
All right, at this point, we have no other public hearings, discussion items. Council closing comments. Do you have any comments, council? State of the City's coming up in 2 weeks. Right. Randy and I have been passing back and forth the presentation for that. You want to say something else about it, Randy?
Not related to the state of the city, but I did want to announce that we have replaced our utility director. You all recall Jose Acosta left a little more than a year ago, July of last year, right after I started. Gave me some nightmares, you know, in the interim. And we have replaced Jose Acosta with a new Jose Acosta, whose name is Jose Acosta. So he will be starting here 3 weeks from today. First council meeting after that will be October 14th, and I'll make sure he comes in and says hello. So I'll be handing off my utility director hat and be able to focus on some other things. And looking forward to getting the wastewater treatment plant project back on track and all the other water and sewer related issues.
Do we
under
have any
control.
other potential hires? We got 3, 4 open recs.
Well, we're interviewing for a management analyst position on Friday. We've got several good candidates. I hope to be able to select from that group. Our maintenance supervisor, Raymond Cano, announced his resignation. His last day is Friday. He's going to work for the sheriff's department, which has apparently been a long-time ambition. So congratulations to him. It's our loss for sure, but we've got some good quality staff behind him. So there's 2 positions in maintenance because another one just left a few weeks ago. Then we have a position in parks maintenance. We are also in the process of recruiting for the public works / planning administrative help technician, permit technician, I think is the official title. So, yeah, we've got several opportunities. So take a look at our website and apply if you have an interest.
Very good. Last comments? In that case, I will declare the meeting closed at 7:58.